My name is Camilla, and if you had told me 10 years ago that I'd be living in my childhood home with my husband, Mark, and our daughter, Lily, I would have believed you. But if you added that Mark's mom, Helen, would be our next-door neighbor and that our lives would revolve around their extreme squeamishness, I would have laughed it off. Yet, here we are. Mark and I met in college. He was charming, a bit quirky, but who isn't? We fell in love, got married, and when my parents passed away, we moved into my family home. It was big enough for us and our daughter Lily, who's now 7. Helen, Mark's mom, moved next door shortly after. That's when I learned about their peculiar trait. I remember one dinner that pretty much sums it all up. We were at Mark's cousin's place. Everything was going well until Helen found a hair in her salad. What happened next was, well, unforgettable. "Is this a hair in my salad?" Helen shrieked, holding up the offending strand like it was a poisonous snake. The room fell silent. Everyone's eyes were on her. "Oh, Mom, just put it aside and eat the rest." Mark tried to calm her down, but it was like adding fuel to the fire. "Put it aside? Mark, how can you say that? This is unacceptable." Helen was nearly in tears, her voice rising in pitch. She stood up, grabbing her plate, and to everyone's shock, dumped it into the trash. Then she began tossing other dishes in, one after the other. Mark looked at me, his face a mixture of embarrassment and helplessness. I could only watch in horror as the dinner turned into a disaster. At home, things weren't much different. "Camilla, did you wipe down the counters?" Mark would often ask, peering over my shoulder as I cleaned the kitchen. "Yes, Mark, like I do every day," I'd reply, trying to hide my frustration. His obsession with cleanliness was one thing, but Helen's influence made it worse. "I just don't understand how someone can be so squeamish about everything," I once asked Mark. "Didn't your mom have to deal with your messes as a kid?" Mark shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "Dad handled most of that stuff. Mom couldn't stand it." That explained a lot, but it didn't make living with it any easier. I tried my best to keep things clean and avoid any incidents, but walking on eggshells became a daily routine. Lily, bless her heart, tried to stay out of her grandma's way. She once whispered to me, "Mommy, why is Grandma always so mad about little things?" I hugged her tight, not really having an answer. "Some people just see the world differently, sweetheart." Life with Mark and his mom, Helen, next door, was like living on a strange, squeamish island. It wasn't just about keeping the house clean. It was about adhering to their peculiar standards of cleanliness and avoiding anything that might set them off. I remember one Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen, trying to whip up some pancakes for Lily, and Mark was hovering around like a hawk. "Are you sure you washed your hands?" he asked, for what seemed like the 10th time. "Yes, Mark, I did," I replied, flipping a pancake. "And the spatula is clean. And yes, the pan was washed last night." He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't fully convinced. His eyes darted around the kitchen, looking for any sign of contamination. Lily, sitting at the table, crayons scattered around her, looked up. "Daddy, can you help me color this?" she asked, holding up a coloring book. Mark hesitated, then said, "Maybe later, honey. Daddy has to make sure everything here is okay first." I felt a pang in my heart. Lily just wanted some time with her dad, but his obsessions always came first. It wasn't just inside the house either. Helen had her own set of rules. One day, I decided to confront her about it. I went over to her house and found her in her immaculate living room, dusting an already spotless shelf. "Helen, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. She looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What about?" "It's about this fear of germs and dirt. Don't you think it's a bit excessive?" I asked. Helen put down her duster and sighed. "Camilla, you wouldn't understand. It's not just a dislike. It's a real fear. You have to keep everything clean, or who knows what could happen." "But isn't it a bit too much? I mean, avoiding family gatherings, freaking out over a hair in the food." I tried to reason with her. "That's easy for you to say. You didn't grow up in a house where cleanliness was next to godliness," Helen snapped. "Mark understands. He was raised right." I left her house feeling defeated. It was like talking to a brick wall. Back home, I found Mark disinfecting the doorknobs. "Mark, we need to talk about this," I said, my frustration reaching a breaking point. "About what?" he asked, not looking up from his task. "About how this obsession is affecting our family. Lily needs a normal life, not this constant fear of germs." Mark stopped and looked at me, his expression hard to read. "This is for our safety, Camilla. For Lily's safety. I don't want her getting sick because we weren't careful enough." "But at what cost, Mark? She's afraid to even hug her grandmother," I argued. He didn't have an answer to that. He just went back to his cleaning, leaving me standing there, feeling more alone than ever. I knew something had to change, but I didn't know how to make it happen. I just hoped that someday Mark and Helen would see that there was more to life than living in fear of a little dirt. As days turned into weeks, I watched Lily grow more and more reserved, especially around her grandma Helen. It wasn't just the usual shyness some kids have around their grandparents. This was fear, plain and simple. Fear of doing something wrong, something that would upset her grandma's rigid sense of order. One evening, while I was tucking Lily into bed, she looked up at me with her big, worried eyes. "Mommy, why doesn't Grandma like me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I was taken aback. "Lily, Grandma loves you. She has her own way of showing it," I said, trying to comfort her. "But she always looks so mad, and she never hugs me." Lily's voice trembled. I hugged her tightly. "I know, sweetie. Grandma has a hard time with messes and germs. It's not about you, I promise." Lily nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully understand. How could she? Helen's behavior was hard enough for me to grasp, let alone a 7-year-old. The next day, I decided to have a gentle talk with Helen. I found her in her garden, meticulously trimming her rose bushes. "Helen, can I talk to you for a minute?" I asked, approaching her. She put down her gardening shears and wiped her hands on a cloth. "What is it, Camilla?" "It's about Lily. She feels like you don't like her," I said, choosing my words carefully. Helen frowned. "That's ridiculous. Of course I like her. She's my granddaughter." "I know, but you never show her any affection. You don't hug her, and she's picking up on that. It's making her feel unwanted," I explained. Helen looked genuinely surprised. I hadn't thought about that. It's just that children are so messy and... "Helen, she's a child. She needs love and affection, not just rules and cleanliness," I said, hoping to get through to her. Helen sighed, looking down at her perfectly manicured lawn. "I'll try, Camilla. I'm not making any promises, but I'll try." It wasn't much, but it was a start. I thanked her and went back inside, feeling a small glimmer of hope. That evening, when Helen came over for dinner, I watched her make an effort. She was stiff and awkward, but she sat next to Lily and asked her about school. Lily was hesitant at first, but she eventually started talking about her day, her eyes lighting up as she described her art project. Mark noticed the change too. After dinner, as we were cleaning up, he said, "Mom was different tonight, nicer." I nodded. "I talked to her, about Lily. I think she's trying." Mark looked at me, a hint of gratitude in his eyes. "Thanks, Camilla. That means a lot." It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. I just hoped it was the beginning of something better, not just a fleeting moment of normalcy. One day, everything changed. It was about my Aunt June's passing. She lived in a city a few hours away, and her funeral demanded my presence. This meant leaving Lily, my 7-year-old daughter, in the care of my husband, Mark, for a couple of days. The evening before my departure, I sat down with Mark in our cozy living room, the walls lined with family photos, some of which included Aunt June. "Mark, I'm really worried about leaving Lily with you," I began, my voice tinged with concern. "You know how she is, and with your... well, you know." Mark put down the book he was reading and looked at me with a reassuring yet somewhat distant gaze. "Camilla, we'll be fine. It's just 2 days. I know I'm not great with messes, but I can manage. It's my daughter we're talking about." I wanted to believe him, but doubts lingered. I handed him a list of emergency contacts and instructions I had prepared. "Everything's on here, from her mealtimes to her bedtime story routine. And please, if anything happens, Just call Helen or the numbers on this list." He nodded, taking the list but not really looking at it. "Got it. We'll be fine, Camilla. Go and pay your respects to Aunt June without worrying." The drive to the funeral was a blur of anxious thoughts. I called Mark several times. Each time, his response was the same. "Everything's under control, Camilla. Focus on your family there." But my mother's intuition told me something wasn't right. When I returned 2 days later, a sense of dread filled me as I approached our home. It looked unusually quiet and deserted. Frantically, I called Mark, but my calls went unanswered. Rushing inside, I called out, "Lily, Mark!" There was no response, just an eerie silence. Then, from the staircase, I heard a small, trembling voice. "Mommy?" It was Lily, looking small and forlorn, clutching her favorite plush bunny. "What happened, sweetie? Where's Daddy?" I asked, my heart pounding. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Daddy left last night. He said he couldn't stay here." I knelt down, trying to hide my shock and anger. "Why did he leave, Lily? Did something happen?" Lily nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I was sick. I threw up. Daddy got scared and said he had to go to Grandma's." My mind reeled with disbelief and anger. Mark had left our daughter alone because he couldn't handle a bit of vomit? "Did he say when he'd be back?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure for Lily's sake. She shook her head, her small hands gripping her bunny tighter. "No, Mommy, he just left. I was scared." I hugged her, feeling a protective rage building inside me. This was more than just Mark's usual squeamishness. This was outright neglect. As I comforted Lily, I glanced around. The house was in disarray, a stark contrast to its usual neatness. Toys were scattered, dishes piled up, and there was a stain on the carpet that I didn't dare to inspect closely. Mark's fear of mess had not only trumped his responsibilities as a father, but had also led to him abandoning our sick child. I knew then that something had to change. This wasn't just about coping with Mark and Helen's peculiarities anymore. This was about the safety and well-being of my child. I had to confront Mark and Helen, but first, I needed to take care of Lily. She was my priority. Once I made sure Lily was okay, had eaten, and was resting, I called Mark again, my fingers trembling with fury. This time, he answered, his voice cautious. "Mark, what the hell were you thinking? Leaving Lily alone like that?" I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. "Camilla, I couldn't handle it. You know how I am with that stuff. I thought she'd be fine." Mark's voice was defensive, almost detached. "Fine? She's a child, Mark. She was sick and scared. You're her father. You're supposed to take care of her, not run away at the first sign of trouble." Mark was silent on the other end, and I knew that our conversation was far from over. After ensuring Lily was safe and had calmed down, I knew I had to confront Mark and Helen. My hands were shaking as I dialed Mark's number again. This time, he picked up immediately. "Mark, we need to talk, now. In person," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Okay, I'm coming over," he replied, a hint of reluctance in his voice. I paced around the living room, waiting. When Mark arrived, he wasn't alone. Helen was with him. They stood at the doorstep, neither making a move to come in. The sight of them, standing there so unaffected, fueled my anger. "What you did, leaving Lily alone when she was sick, is inexcusable, Mark. How could you?" I started, my voice rising. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "I told you I couldn't handle it. I didn't think it was a big deal. She's 7, not a baby." "Not a big deal? She was terrified, Mark. Alone in this big house. Anything could have happened." I couldn't believe his casual dismissal. Helen chimed in, her tone defensive. "Camilla, he did what he thought was best. He's not good with sickness. You know this." "That's not an excuse, Helen. He's her father. It's his responsibility to take care of her, no matter what," I shot back, my gaze fixed on Mark. Mark looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I panicked. "I'm sorry, okay?" "Sorry doesn't cut it, Mark. This is about our daughter's safety. And you, Helen, encouraging this behavior? It's harmful, not just annoying," I said, my frustration boiling over. Helen's face hardened. "We've always been this way. It's not our fault you don't understand." Understanding dawned on me then. This wasn't just about cleanliness or a simple fear of germs. This was deeper, more ingrained, and it was affecting Lily. I understand more than you think. What I don't understand is how you can justify neglecting a child, I said, my voice steady but firm. Mark finally spoke up. Camilla, let's just calm down and talk about this. Calm down? Mark, your actions put our daughter in danger. I can't just calm down about that. And I can't let it happen again, I said, my decision clear in my mind. I looked at both of them, standing there, still not fully grasping the gravity of the situation. I need to think about what's best for Lily. And right now, I don't think that includes being around this level of irresponsibility. Mark and Helen exchanged a glance, but neither said anything. They knew I was serious. I'll be in touch about what happens next. For now, I think it's best if you both leave, I said, ushering them out the door. As they walked away, a mix of emotions washed over me. Anger, disappointment, but also a sense of clarity. I needed to protect Lily, and if that meant making tough decisions, so be it. The confrontation had revealed a stark truth. I couldn't rely on Mark or Helen when it came to Lily's well-being. After Mark and Helen left, my mind was racing. I knew I had to take concrete steps to ensure Lily's safety. The first thing I did was call my friend Sarah, who's a lawyer. I explained the situation to her, my voice shaky with emotion. Sarah, I don't know what to do. Mark left Lily alone at home when she was sick. I can't trust him anymore, I said, feeling a lump in my throat. Sarah's voice was calm and reassuring. Camilla, first of all, make sure Lily is okay now. Have you seen a doctor? No, not yet. I'll call one right away, I replied, realizing I had been so caught up in my anger that I hadn't thought of this. Good. Get Lily checked out. Then we can talk about your options legally. This is serious, Camilla. Leaving a child alone like that. It's not just irresponsible, it's dangerous, Sarah said. I hung up and immediately called our family doctor, who agreed to see Lily right away. Thankfully, she was fine, just a bit shaken up from the whole ordeal. The next day, I met with Sarah. We sat in her office, a small, unassuming room filled with legal books and papers. You have grounds to file for sole custody, Camilla. What Mark did was essentially child endangerment, she explained. I listened, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. What about Helen? She's just as responsible for this mindset of Mark's. Sarah nodded. You can file a restraining order against her if you think she poses a threat to Lily's well-being. It was a lot to take in. Filing for divorce, sole custody, possibly a restraining order. It felt like my entire world was collapsing. But then I thought of Lily, her frightened face when I found her alone, and I knew I had no choice. I'll do it. I have to protect Lily, I said, my voice firm. Sarah gave me a sympathetic look. I'll start the paperwork. It won't be easy, Camilla, but I'll be with you every step of the way. Over the next few weeks, life was a whirlwind of legal meetings and emotional upheavals. Mark tried to talk to me, to apologize, but I couldn't get past what he had done. Helen, on the other hand, was furious. She accused me of overreacting, of tearing the family apart. You're making a mistake, Camilla. Mark is a good father. He just made one mistake, Helen said during one heated phone call. One mistake that could have cost our daughter her life, Helen. I can't overlook that. I won't, I replied, my resolve unwavering. Eventually, the court granted me sole custody of Lily. Mark was allowed supervised visits, but Helen was barred from seeing Lily without my permission. It was a bitter victory. My marriage was over, my family broken, but Lily was safe, and that was all that mattered. Life after the divorce and the court's decision was like stepping into a new world. It was a world where I was both a single parent and the sole protector of my little girl, Lily. The divorce had been tough, with its fair share of tears and heartache, but it was done. It was time to move forward. One evening, as I was tucking Lily into bed, she looked up at me with her curious eyes. Mommy, are we going to be okay? Just the two of us? She asked, her voice tinged with a mix of concern and hope. I smiled and brushed her hair back from her forehead. Yes, sweetie, we're going to be just fine. It's going to be different, but we have each other, and that's what matters. Lily snuggled into her pillow, looking more relaxed. I like it being just us. It's quieter. I laughed softly. Yes, it is. And we can make our own rules now, like pancake Saturdays and maybe getting a pet? What do you think? Her face lit up at the mention of a pet. Can we get a puppy? I've always wanted a puppy. We'll see, I said, not wanting to make any promises I couldn't keep. Now, time to sleep. Big day tomorrow. After Lily fell asleep, I went to the living room and sat down with a cup of tea. The house was quiet, peaceful. I thought about everything that had happened, how much Lily and I had been through. It hadn't been easy, but I felt a sense of pride and strength. I had stood up for my daughter, for her safety and well-being. The next day, I took Lily to the park. We walked hand in hand, the sun shining down on us. "Mommy, look at the ducks!" Lily exclaimed, pointing at the pond. We stopped and watched the ducks, and I realized how much I had missed these simple moments, moments without worry or fear. "Mommy, can I ask you something?" Lily said, looking up at me. "Of course, sweetie. What is it? Will Daddy be okay? Will he be sad without us?" Her question caught me off guard, but it was a fair one. I knelt down to be at eye level with her. "Your daddy loves you very much, Lily. And yes, he will be okay. We all will be. Sometimes people need to be apart to be happy, but that doesn't change how much we love each other." Lily nodded, taking in my words. "I love you, Mommy." "I love you too, more than anything," I said, hugging her. As we continued our walk in the park, I felt a sense of hope for the future. There would be challenges, of course, but I was ready to face them. This was our new beginning, a chance to build a life filled with love, laughter, and happiness. Just Lily and me.